An encounter that changes everything. The negotiation hall on the planet Torval Prime was a grim, foreboding place. Dark stone walls bore scars from countless battles, and the air smelled faintly of scorched metal. It was an apt setting for the tense standoff unfolding within. Nathan Steele stood at the center of the room, his dark suit immaculate despite the suffocating heat. His sharp blue eyes scanned the Elyrian delegation seated across from him. The Elyrians were tall, their pale silver skin shimmering under the harsh light. Their expressions betrayed nothing, but Nathan could feel the tension radiating from them like static. They weren't here to compromise, they were here to dominate. His voice was steady as he addressed the room. The conflict between your people and the Jarn is tearing this sector apart. If we don't find common ground, this war will consume both of your worlds, and many more beyond them. A low murmur rippled through the Elyrians. Nathan's gaze locked onto one figure seated near the center of their delegation. She was different, her sharp features framed by cascading silver hair, her violet eyes glinting with something more than the stoicism her people were known for. She exuded a quiet authority, and when she spoke, the room fell silent. Your words are bold, human, she said, her voice smooth but tinged with a hint of challenge. But bold words do not undo centuries of bloodshed. Why should the Elyrians trust your kind, let alone the Jarn? Nathan took a step closer, his hands clasped behind his back. Because humans have learned the cost of endless war. My ancestors destroyed their own planet with their arrogance and violence. We nearly lost everything. But we rebuilt. We learned that survival doesn't come from conquering, it comes from working together. Her eyes narrowed, and Nathan felt the weight of her scrutiny. You speak of unity, yet your species is fractured. Your kind has no right to preach wisdom to us. Nathan didn't flinch. He knew this was a test, a deliberate attempt to provoke him. You're right, he said simply. Humans aren't perfect. But it's because of our imperfections that we understand the stakes. We've been to the brink, and we know how to pull back. Can you say the same? For a moment, her gaze softened, as if his words had struck a chord. But the moment passed, and her mask of composure returned. You assume much, human. But your resolve is intriguing. Before Nathan could respond, the negotiation chamber shuddered violently. The lights flickered, and alarms blared. An explosion ripped through the outer wall, sending shards of stone and metal raining down. The room erupted into chaos as delegates scrambled for cover. Nathan's instincts took over. He grabbed the Elyrian woman's arm, pulling her to safety behind a crumbling column. She glared at him, but before she could protest, another blast rocked the chamber. Smoke and dust choked the air. Stay down. Nathan shouted over the din. He scanned the room, spotting figures in dark combat gear moving through the wreckage. Whoever they weren't here to talk. The woman's voice cut through the chaos. We need to move. They'll kill everyone in this room. Nathan didn't argue. There's a service exit in the west corridor. Can you keep up? Her lips curled into a faint smirk. Try me. They darted through the wreckage, dodging falling debris in stray energy bolts. Nathan was impressed by her agility, she moved with a fluid grace that belied her imposing stature. As they reached the corridor, she grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Why did you save me? She asked, her violet eyes searching his. Nathan hesitated, caught off guard by the question. Because I'm not here to see more blood spilled. And because I need your help to stop this madness. Her expression shifted, a flicker of something unspoken crossing her face. Then let's make sure neither of us dies today. They ran together into the smoke-filled shadows, the sounds of destruction fading behind them. For the first time, Nathan felt a spark of hope. She wasn't just a barrier to peace, she might be the key to it. And though he didn't know her name yet, he felt the weight of her presence, like a storm waiting to break. Their fates were entwined now, whether they liked it or not. A dangerous alliance. The wilderness of Torval Prime stretched endlessly before them, a maze of jagged cliffs, dense forests, and winding rivers that shimmered under the planet's twin suns. Nathan and the Elyrian woman moved quickly, their path hidden by the terrain's natural chaos. The explosions and screams of the negotiation hall were now a distant echo, but Nathan's heart still raced with the urgency of survival. The woman moved with purpose, her silver hair catching the light as she navigated the uneven ground. Nathan was trying to keep up, his earth-honed stamina tested by her seemingly tireless pace. After several miles, she finally slowed near a rocky overhang that offered cover from view. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "We'll rest here," she said curtly. Nathan leaned against a boulder, catching his breath. "Do you always run a marathon after almost being assassinated, or am I just lucky?" Her lips twitched in the faintest suggestion of a smirk. "You're fortunate I didn't leave you behind. Your pace is lacking." Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "Humans weren't built for Illyrian endurance, I guess." She tilted her head, studying him. "You risked your life for mine back there. Why?" He met her gaze, his expression serious. "Because that's what humans do. We fight for what matters, even when the odds are against us." Her violet eyes flickered with something, curiosity, perhaps, or doubt. "You hardly know me. What if I was your enemy?" Nathan shrugged. "I don't think enemies work together to survive." For a moment, she said nothing, then extended her hand. "Lirena. My name is Lirena." He took her hand, her grip firm and warm. "Nathan Steele." They sat in silence for a while, the tension between them softened by the shared quiet. The sounds of distant wildlife filled the air, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. But the reprieve was short-lived. "We can't stay here long," Lirena said, her voice breaking the stillness. "Whoever orchestrated that attack will be hunting us. They won't stop until we're both dead." Nathan nodded. "Do you have any idea who's behind it?" Lirena's expression darkened. "It wasn't the Jarn, if that's what you're thinking. This was too precise, too coordinated. Someone within my own ranks is trying to ensure the negotiations fail." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Sabotage. Great. That explains why they didn't hesitate to take you out along with everyone else." She nodded grimly. "And if we don't expose them, this war will escalate beyond control." Nathan frowned, his mind racing. "Then we need proof, something that ties them to the attack. Do you have any idea where to start?" Lirena hesitated, then reached into a concealed pocket, pulling out a small, crystalline device. This data shard contains sensitive communications between Illyrian officials. I managed to secure it before the meeting. I hoped it would be enough to convince my people to negotiate in good faith. Nathan's eyebrows rose. "And now you think it might hold the names of the people trying to sabotage the peace talks?" "It's possible," she admitted. "But we'll need the right equipment to decrypt it." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, considering their options. "My ship has a decryption module. It's not state-of-the-art, but it might do the job." "Then we head for your ship," Lirena said, standing. "But we'll need to move carefully. The attackers will have anticipated that." Nathan stood, his determination hardening. "Let them try. I'm not letting them win." As they prepared to leave, Lirena glanced at him, her gaze softer than before. "You're different from other humans I've encountered." He grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It wasn't meant as one," she replied, but there was a faint glimmer of amusement in her eyes. They set off again, their footsteps quiet against the rocky terrain. Despite the dangers ahead, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that their unlikely partnership might be the best chance at stopping the bloodshed. As they climbed a steep ridge, Lirena paused, her posture tense. "We're being followed." Nathan froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the small blaster at his side. How many? 3, she said, her voice low. Their movements are careful, professionals. Nathan's heart pounded. We can't outrun them, can we? She shook her head. No. But we can set a trap. Nathan nodded, his resolve hardening. What do you need me to do? Lirena gave him a long look, as if weighing his worth. Finally, she said, stay alive. Nathan smirked. No promises. The chase had turned into a hunt, and Nathan could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The odds were against them, but he couldn't help but feel a strange confidence. Together, they might just have a chance. Bound by fate. The rocky terrain of Torval Prime provided no shortage of hiding spots, and Nathan and Lirena took full advantage as they prepared for their pursuers. They crouched behind an outcropping of jagged stone, their breath steady and quiet. The faint crunch of footsteps on gravel reached their ears, growing louder with each passing second. They're closing in, Nathan whispered, his grip tightening on his blaster. Lirena nodded, her violet eyes scanning the landscape. We'll strike when they're close enough to see the whites of their eyes. Do Illyrians even have whites in their eyes? Nathan asked, a flicker of nervous humor in his voice. She shot him a sidelong glance, her lips twitching. Focus, Nathan. The footsteps stopped, and silence fell like a suffocating blanket. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. Whoever was hunting them was well trained, they knew how to mask their presence. Lirena's hand brushed against his arm, steadying him. They're circling, she murmured, her voice barely audible. They'll flank us if we don't move now. Nathan nodded, trusting her instincts. Together, they crept along the ridge, using the uneven ground to stay out of sight. The attackers were close, too close. Nathan could hear their faint breathing, the quiet hum of their weapons at the ready. Lirena moved like a shadow, her silver hair blending with the pale rock. With a swift motion, she darted forward, a dagger gleaming in her hand. Her target didn't even have time to react before she brought him down silently, her movements precise and deadly. Nathan swallowed hard. He'd seen plenty of combat, but Lirena's efficiency was something else entirely. He raised his blaster, covering her as she signaled for him to advance. Another figure emerged from the rocks, their weapon trained on Lirena. Nathan didn't hesitate. He fired, the energy bolt striking the attacker square in the chest. The figure crumpled, their weapon clattering to the ground. Nice shot, Lirena said, her voice cool and composed. Thanks, Nathan replied, his heart still pounding. One more to go. As if on cue, the third attacker sprang from the shadows, tackling Nathan to the ground. His blaster skittered away, and he found himself grappling with an Elyrian twice his size. The attacker's strength was overwhelming, but Nathan's instincts kicked in. He twisted, using the momentum to drive his knee into the Elyrian's stomach. The attacker grunted, momentarily stunned, and Nathan seized the opportunity. He reached for a loose rock, slamming it into the side of the Illyrian's head. The attacker collapsed, unconscious. Lirena appeared beside him, her dagger still in hand. Impressive, she said, offering him a hand. You're not as fragile as you look. Nathan took her hand, pulling himself up. I'll take that as a compliment. It was, she said, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. They didn't linger. Lirena quickly searched the bodies, retrieving a small device from one of the attackers. She examined it, her expression darkening. It's a tracking beacon, she said, holding it up for Nathan to see. They've been following us with this. Nathan frowned. How'd they plant it on us? Lirena's gaze dropped to the crystalline shard in her pocket. It must be this. They're tracking the data shard. Then we have to destroy it, Nathan said. She shook her head. No. This shard is our only proof of the betrayal. Without it, the sabotage continues unchecked. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Then we need to find a way to shield it. My ship's systems might be able to block the signal. Lirena nodded. Then we move. Quickly. They left the bodies where they fell, knowing their pursuers wouldn't be the last. The trek to Nathan's ship was grueling, the rocky landscape unforgiving. As they walked, the weight of their situation pressed down on them. You didn't have to stay, Lirena said suddenly, breaking the silence. You could have left after the attack. Saved yourself. Nathan glanced at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her tone. And let you handle this alone? Not a chance. She looked away, her expression unreadable. You're an enigma, Nathan Steele. Most humans I've met would have cut their losses by now. He chuckled softly. Guess I'm not most humans. They continued in silence, the bond between them growing stronger with each step. When they finally reached the edge of the spaceport, Nathan felt a flicker of hope. His battered freighter sat in the distance, its ramp down and engines powered off. We made it, he said, relief washing over him. Lirena's gaze remained fixed on the ship. Let's hope your systems are as good as you claim. The fate of more than just us depends on it. Nathan nodded, his resolve hardening. We'll make it work. We have to. As they approached the ship, the faint hum of engines filled the air. Nathan's heart sank. Enemy ships were closing in, their sleek forms cutting through the sky like predators. They found us, Lirena said, her voice tight. Nathan clenched his fists. Then we fight. The first shots rang out, plasma bolts sizzling past them as they sprinted for the ship. Lirena's dagger gleamed in her hand, and Nathan's blaster was ready. The battle for survival, and the fate of peace, had only just begun. The passion that ignites change. Plasma bolts streaked through the air as Nathan and Lirena sprinted toward the freighter. The ground erupted in bursts of fire and debris around them, forcing them to zigzag to avoid the deadly shots. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest, every muscle in his body screaming for rest. But he couldn't stop now, not when so much was at stake. Keep moving, he shouted, glancing back at Lirena, who was a step behind him, her movements swift and calculated. The enemy ships descended, hovering ominously above the spaceport. Nathan could make out the shadowy figures of their pursuers disembarking, weapons at the ready. Lirena threw a small energy grenade over her shoulder, and it detonated with a sharp crack, forcing the enemies to scatter. They reached the base of the freighter's ramp. Nathan slammed his hand against the control panel, and the ramp began to retract as soon as they were aboard. Plasma bolts pinged against the hull, but the ship's shields held, for now. In here. Nathan yelled, ushering Lirena into the cockpit. He dove into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the controls as the engines roared to life. Lirena strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her eyes scanning the ship's systems with practiced efficiency. Enemies on all sides, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. 3 ships, closing fast. Nathan gritted his teeth. We'll have to punch through them. The freighter surged upward, its thrusters roaring as it lifted off the ground. Enemy fire raked across the shields, warning alarms blaring in the cockpit. Nathan jerked the controls, weaving the ship through a hailstorm of plasma fire. Shields are at 50%. Lirena warned, her fingers dancing across the console. We won't last long like this. Then we won't give them the chance, Nathan replied, his voice tight. He pushed the throttle to maximum, the freighter accelerating toward the edge of the atmosphere. The enemy ships followed, their sleek forms slicing through the sky like predators. Nathan spun the freighter into a hard roll, narrowly avoiding a missile that streaked past the cockpit window. Do you trust me? Lirena asked suddenly, her gaze fixed on him. Nathan glanced at her, caught off guard by the question. Right now? With my life. Good, she said. Because this is going to be risky. She reached across the console, activating a secondary system Nathan barely recognized. A surge of energy rippled through the ship, and the lights flickered momentarily. On the display, a powerful electromagnetic pulse began charging. "What are you doing?" Nathan asked, his voice laced with concern. "Buying us time," she said. "When I trigger this, it'll disable everything within a short radius, including their ships. But it'll leave us vulnerable too." Nathan nodded, understanding the stakes. "Do it." The enemy ships closed in, their weapons lighting up the sky. Lirena's hand hovered over the control, her expression focused and unyielding. "Now." She slammed the button, and the freighter shuddered violently as the pulse erupted from its core. The enemy ships faltered mid-flight, their systems going dark as they plummeted toward the planet's surface. Nathan's freighter drifted, its engines offline, but still holding steady in the thin atmosphere. "Engines rebooting," Lirena said, her voice calm despite the situation. "We've got about 30 seconds before they come back online." Nathan exhaled, the tension easing slightly. "You're full of surprises, you know that." She turned to him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I could say the same about you." Before he could respond, the cockpit was filled with a blaring alarm. Nathan's heart sank as he saw a fourth ship descending from orbit, a massive cruiser that dwarfed their freighter. "Looks like we're not out of the woods yet," Nathan muttered, gripping the controls as the engine sputtered back to life. The cruiser's weapons charged, its targeting systems locking onto them. Lirena's gaze hardened as she studied the display. "We can't fight that. Our only chance is to outmaneuver it." Nathan nodded, pulling the freighter into a steep dive. The ship groaned under the strain, the atmosphere streaking past the cockpit in a blur. The cruiser followed, its weapons firing in controlled bursts that narrowly missed their ship. "We need cover," Lirena said, her voice edged with urgency. "The canyon to the west, if we make it there, we can lose them." Nathan adjusted their trajectory, the freighter hurtling toward the jagged canyon below. The cruiser pursued relentlessly, its weapons scorching the air around them. Nathan's hands were steady on the controls, but he could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. As they entered the canyon, the walls closed in around them, forcing Nathan to navigate with razor-sharp precision. The freighter weaved between towering rock formations, the cruiser struggling to follow their agile movements. "Almost there," Nathan said, his voice tight with concentration. "Hold on." A narrow passage loomed ahead, barely wide enough for their ship. Nathan pushed the freighter to its limits, the hull scraping against the rock as they shot through the gap. The cruiser hesitated, unable to fit through the passage. Its weapons fired one last volley, but it was too late, the freighter emerged on the other side, leaving their pursuers behind. Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his hands trembling slightly on the controls. Lirena turned to him, her expression a mix of relief and admiration. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Nathan corrected, meeting her gaze. In that moment, the tension between them dissolved, replaced by something deeper. Lirena reached out, her hand resting on his. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." Nathan smiled, his grip tightening on her hand. "We're not done yet. But we're getting there." Their bond had been forged in fire, and as the freighter soared toward safety, Nathan knew one thing for certain: they were stronger together than they ever could be apart. A new dawn. Nathan's freighter soared above the atmosphere of Torval Prime, the chaos below fading into memory. The ship's systems hummed steadily now, but the tension in the cockpit remained thick. Nathan glanced at Lirena, who sat beside him, her violet eyes locked on the data shard in her hand. "That shard better have something good," he said, trying to inject some lightness into the moment. "We've been shot at, chased, and nearly vaporized because of it." Lirena's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "If it doesn't, I'll owe you more than my gratitude." Nathan chuckled softly, his hands steady on the controls. I'll settle for a peaceful galaxy. As the freighter reached orbit, Lirena slid the data shard into a decryption port on the console. The ship's computer whirred to life, processing the encrypted files. Lines of alien text and images filled the screen, and Lirena's fingers danced over the keys, translating them with precision. Her expression darkened as the files unfolded. Here it is, she said, her voice tight. Communications logs, financial transfers, and orders. It's all here, proof that the attack on the negotiations was orchestrated by a rogue faction within my government. Nathan leaned closer, studying the screen. This is solid evidence. Enough to expose them and stop the sabotage. Lirena nodded, but her jaw was set, tension radiating from her. This will change everything for my people. Betrayal at this level is a stain that won't be easily erased. Nathan placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Sometimes, the truth hurts. But it's the only way forward. She looked at him, her gaze softer now. You speak as though you've lived this yourself. Nathan hesitated, the weight of his past pressing down on him. Let's just say I've seen what happens when lies are allowed to fester. It destroys everything: trust, hope, lives. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the noise of the universe seemed to fade. Lirena's hand reached for his, her grip firm yet gentle. You're more than a soldier or a diplomat, Nathan Steele. You're different. He smiled, a flicker of warmth breaking through the tension. I could say the same about you, Lirena. The moment was broken by an alert from the ship's console. A transmission request flashed across the screen. Nathan pressed a button, and the image of a grizzled human admiral appeared. Admiral Greaves, leader of the human delegation, looked both relieved and wary. Steele, Greaves barked. We've been trying to reach you. We thought you were dead. Not yet, Nathan replied. We've got evidence proving the attack was an inside job. Sending the files now. He nodded to Lirena, who uploaded the decrypted data. Greaves' expression shifted as he reviewed the evidence, his jaw tightening. This is damning. If we play it right, we can force the Elyrian Council to confront this faction and salvage the peace talks. Make it count, Admiral, Nathan said. This war doesn't need more bodies. It needs an end. Greaves grunted. Understood. And Steele, good work out there. Both of you. The transmission ended, leaving the cockpit in silence. Lirena leaned back in her seat, her tension slowly easing. It's out of our hands now. Nathan nodded, exhaling deeply. We've done all we can. Lirena stood, her movements fluid as she approached the cockpit's viewport. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of light and shadow. Nathan joined her, the two of them standing side by side. You risked everything for a peace that wasn't even yours to fight for, she said, her voice soft. Why? Nathan turned to her, his expression earnest. Because peace is worth fighting for. And because I believed in you. Her gaze met his, unguarded for the first time. You've changed me, Nathan Steele. You've shown me a strength I didn't know I was capable of. And you've shown me that even in the darkest moments, there's always a spark of hope, he replied. The space between them seemed to shrink as they stood there, the weight of their journey drawing them closer. Lirena reached up, her hand brushing against his cheek. I never thought I'd feel this way about a human. Nathan smiled, his hand covering hers. And I never thought I'd find someone like you. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and powerful, a union of two souls who had faced the storm and emerged stronger. It wasn't just a moment of passion, it was a promise. A promise to fight for each other, to stand together no matter what the galaxy threw their way. When they finally broke apart, Lirena rested her forehead against his, a small smile playing on her lips. What now? Nathan grinned. Now, we see if peace can hold. And if it doesn't, we fight for it together. The freighter drifted through the stars, its path uncertain but full of promise. Nathan and Lirena stood united, their bond a beacon of hope in a galaxy on the brink. Whatever came next, they would face it together. For the first time in a long time, Nathan felt that peace wasn't just a distant dream. It was within reach, and it was worth every battle to protect it.